Hello, and welcome to Leading with Power, Engaging Youth in Transformative Advocacy, part of a series of live events presented by the National Center for Youth Law. We are delighted to have today's discussion moderated by our own Kendra Lizardo, Senior Program Associate, Reproductive Health Equity Project for Foster Youth. Kendra, welcome and thank you for moderating today's discussion.
Yeah, thank you so much, Patty, and thank you whoever is here joining us today in this conversation. As Patty said, my name is Kendra Lizardo. My pronouns are she, hers, and ella, and I am part of the Reproductive Health Equity Project for Foster Youth, which is a collective impact campaign under the National Center for Youth Law. And yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation because this is something that we often talk about within our work, is really like centering youth and young adult perspectives within our work and allowing their input to really inform the direction of systemic change. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We have an amazing panel, and I've had the privilege to get to meet all three of our panelists prior and learn about some of the work that they're doing in the community. But I feel like I can't do it justice, so I'll allow them to introduce themselves. But before I do that, I'll just give kind of like a quick background of my work and how I ended up here today moderating this discussion. So I started my career as a social worker within the New York City jail system. I was advocating on behalf of young people and their healthcare services. So ensuring that they were, their needs were being met and heard, but naturally in a space that's really rooted in violence and power and control, it's hard to empower anyone. It was hard for me to empower the young people and also to feel like as an advocate, I was really making meaningful and impactful change. And that's kind of what led me to NCYL. I realized I really needed to be addressing systems from a different, at various different levels. So now I am part of the RHEP team, like I said, and really we work to advance sexual and reproductive health services for young people in foster care. And the really unique thing about our team is that we have a youth advisory board that informs all of our work. We refer to them as the experts and the consultants of all of our initiatives because they have their lived experiences and were personally impacted by systems. So what RHEP does is it really pushes the narrative that young people know what's best for them. And we as advocates are really there to just support them in making sure that they get the resources and information and education that they need to then make informed decisions about their bodies and their lives. So yeah, that's kind of what we want to do today as well, is really turn the microphone from me. I'm going to stop talking and introduce some of our panelists, and so that they could talk to us a little bit about some of the work that they're doing right now in the community, also on various different levels. So yeah, I want to pass it over. Maybe we could start with Christina and then meet Obrian and Xavier. So yeah, if you could just share your name with us, your pronouns, and any titles that you identify with in life and your professional work, that would be awesome.
All right, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Christina Parker again. My pronouns are Z, Zer, Zers. Some of the titles that I identify with is a creative advocate, activist, a student, right? A leader in so many different forums. And I'm also a part of RHEP as well. And I'll go ahead and pass it on.
Yes, hey everybody. My name is Obrian Rosario. My pronouns are he, him, his. And I'm the executive director of outreach at the Peer Defense Project. Some of the other titles that I hold: I'm currently a student at Howard University, where I'm studying to become a lawyer. I'm in the BA/JD program. I'm a young person. I identify as Dominican, Afro-Latino. I'm from New York. I am a godfather. I am an uncle, I'm a brother, I'm a godson, a grandson, a son. And much like Christina, I consider myself an advocate, a creative advocate, and also a storyteller. I'll pass it to Xavier.
Hello, my name is Xavier Garcia. My pronouns are he, him. I work for Garas, which helps like run a couple of youth groups, which I help facilitate a couple of them. I'm also an advocate for the youth, and that is it.
Yeah, thank you. And I apologize because the timing of life didn't make sense. We have someone mowing outside, so hopefully you can all still hear me. But I really want to ask you all, these titles, and I said this last time, are so creative, which just speaks to like how our advocacy now needs to be innovative and how it's adapting on so many different levels. Like you said, Xavier, you're working on more of direct service, and we have Christina and Obrian working on law and policy and also just like social impact change. So I want to ask, like, what led you all into this work? Like, what motivated and inspired you to get into advocacy, and how did your personal like life experiences guide you in that direction? And if anybody wants to start.
Yeah, I don't mind starting. What led me to advocacy, was college, was, my experience, within the foster care system, going into undergrad, and just seeing like how my experience wasn't just mine. It was so many other people's experiences. And I was able to get connected to an organization that really allowed me the space to use my voice, really developed me and supported me through that process of not only being like, your voice is what matters, but it's essential to the conversation. And just having that experience and feeling empowered, right, made me want to empower others to use their voice, because my voice, was essential, especially at a younger age, because I was so close to the problem. And as I age and as I grow, I want to make sure that I provide that same stage for other people who are closest to the issue, because I understand that their voices are essential in order to make sure that things are working in their best interest in the future, or in the interest of people that are coming along.
Yeah, thank you so much, Christina. What about you, Obrian?
Yes. So I say that I grew up in an advocate household. My mother was never formally a lawyer, and to this day is never formally a lawyer. Her education didn't span past high school, but what has always been ingrained in me is that you help other people and you serve other people. All throughout my life, there was always somebody staying on my couch. There was always somebody eating at my dinner table. There was always somebody, my mom looking for somebody, taking somebody to work. And so what I really learned is that, like, you don't need to be a lawyer. You don't need to be a doctor to help people. You can help people with what's exactly around you. And if everybody can do that in a very like non-transactional mutual aid, and really trying to like invest and help communities, and that's how we can start to address the needs and the issues. Joe Biden is sitting in his office, but he doesn't know what's going on in Corona, Queens. And so I think that like it's really important that we're like, holding each other and helping each other. And so those senses of community, those senses of standing up for people, those senses of service have always been ingrained in me. And so my advocacy kind of started when I was in middle school, high school. I had been accustomed to being the only Black person in the room as I was navigating the New York City school system. New York City school system is the most segregated school system in the entire nation. And so while I was that one Black kid in the gifted and talented program in the specialized high schools, my curriculum didn't represent me, my teachers didn't represent me. And overall, just like the building and the temperament of the school was just not a place that was made to hold me and made to hold my identities as I moved through the world. And so that made me really realize, like, hey, the system isn't built for you. And, you got to continue to do that work that has already been ingrained in you. You got to keep helping the people around you, and you got to keep bringing that like service and community. And so I started advocating with Integrate NYC around 2018 upon learning about like the deep issues around resourcing and school segregation. In New York City, I was able to work on a lawsuit where we just successfully won the right to sports equity in New York City. I went to a school in high school where we had 44 plus sports teams. We had a flight simulator. I was in the Law and Society program, so I got to learn in a courtroom. There was a forensics lab. There was pools. There was 10 floors. There was elevators. But there were schools, there were students that didn't even have a cafeteria to eat their food. And like that type of inequity is just so sickening that like you got to do something. And so I started advocating that way. And what I've been able to do kind of now in my work with the Peer Defense Project is like translate that advocacy into the law and the legality. I've always had an interest for people and humanities. I can sit down and do your math problem, but that's not really what I want to do with my life at the end of the day. I'd much rather be in party with people. I'd much rather be in conversation and in community with people. And so, I've also realized the law is such a big and expansive tool and approach that we can be taking to helping people's needs. I'm not saying that it's the end all be all, but I'm saying that it's a pathway that has resources and that has access. And what I've really thrown myself into is being able to like really expand access to the law. I hope one day that people will be able to really understand how to use the law and utilize it. And at the Peer Defense Project, something that we've been getting into saying is that we're building like a radical freedom law school. Back in the 60s and during the Civil Rights Act, they did this thing called freedom schools where they would just like, teach about the real issues. And I want to do that same type of thing, but like, let's teach about the law and let's learn the law and let's use this tool.
That's amazing. Yeah, and thank you. You're speaking to like this interconnection of all of these systems, right? And how law plays a role in each of them. Thank you. Xavier, what about you?
Hi again.
Hello.
How I got introduced to advocating through GARAs was by a friend. And one day she just told me about like the things they do here and how they help kids who had gone through like past traumas and try to teach them leadership skills. And I never really had anybody to help me out when I was going through stuff. And so I thought it'd be pretty cool to help other kids who also been through things that were pretty similar to me. And so I thought it'd be just all around a nice thing to help kids because I never really had no help. So it's always good to like try to help people who don't really know like if they need help when I think they do. But I don't know, it's just a cool way to help kids, I guess, through GARAs. And I got introduced from another intern, so yeah.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I think we really do need advocacy work at each level. We need it on a direct level as well, because that's where I think most of the healing comes from, right? When we're talking to people from our communities and that have had similar experiences that we have, I think that can be really healing for them and also for us as the advocates. So thank you. So yeah, you're all doing incredibly important work. And I think having conversations with leaders that do hold power in some of these spaces to create change in our communities and in our laws. So I want to ask all of you, like what your experience is like when you are invited to that table and you're having those conversations and you're interacting with different policymakers. What has been your experience? Has it been a good one? Have you faced any particular challenges? What are some feelings when you're in that space? Just if anybody could speak to that, that would be amazing.
I don't mind starting. I've had multiple different experiences. I would say that the first thing that comes to my mind is that even though I'm invited to the table was never built for me in mind to begin with. And a lot of times when I do get to that table, it's apparent. I'm usually the youngest, the only Black person, right? Non-gender conforming person, and my pronouns are not validated in those spaces, right? A lot of the times the things that I'm saying and the expertise that I'm bringing to that space is often questioned, or it's not as taken as serious. I can say something and someone else can say the same thing that has a different role or appears to be older, and their response is say, oh, that's a great idea. And then other spaces I've had with politicians and so forth, where, it was a beautiful thing to have me in that space. And my expertise was really valued and they wanted to learn more. And it wasn't even a table, it was really just like, we don't want no barrier between us, right? We really want to have these conversations. We really want to move things forward. And so I've had the opportunity of experiencing both sides. But oftentimes in those spaces, if I do have if my voice is uplifted in those spaces, it's usually because of all of the work and the years of work that I've done to where they know that my voice and my expertise should be valued, right? And I've seen it too, where other people may come into those same spaces where I have to battle for years in order for my voice to be accepted, and then they're undermined, right? And so I've had multiple different experiences, and it is unfortunate, even in an analogy of bringing it to the table, because the table creates a barrier between you and the problem sometimes, or between that information, right? A lot of the times we think about the tables and we think about chairs, right? But what about the people who need to pull up in a wheelchair, right? What about the people who do not want to sit at the table, right? They want to be in a whole different other space. And so thinking about not only thinking about getting rid of the table, right? And really thinking about how can we meet people where they're at? How can we make sure that we are valuing their experiences and their expertise? And how do we check our implicit biases when we are in those spaces? Thank you.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I remember, Obrian, in one of our conversations, you said something similar, like just flip the whole table around and let's start over and let's do something that actually works for everyone. So I want to give you an opportunity to speak on that as well.
Yeah, I think that Christina nailed it. Like, you know, if I had to say it, that's exactly how I would say it. I think that, like, to much of the points that Zay brought up, I think that when you speak on like youth leadership, I feel like oftentimes the way that we frame it and the way that we bring youth leaders to the table is to be tokenized. I can't tell you how many times I've been tokenized as the only Black boy in the room. I went to, when I was speaking on like that sports equity bill that we were doing, I had the experience of being able to lobby. And I got to sit with my own council member. You know, homeboy had me in there talking to me, and like, you know, it wasn't really like he was really trying to listen to me. You know, it was really like, whoa, it's a young kid from my constituency up in here. Like, I don't get to see these type of people all the time. And you know what ended up coming out of that? Of course, he signed on to the bill, but that was at the cost of me taking pictures with him all throughout City Hall. I've never seen that man ever again in my life. I've never seen those pictures ever again. But what I felt in that moment was I brought to you some powerful advocacy about an issue that impacts me and my people, and you took a picture for your Facebook. I think that like oftentimes like we dress things up for youth in that way. Not only is the table not fitting for them, but we're not even giving them the support to get to that table. Why is it that it's so easy for when we're trying to get keynote speakers for adults that we can book them a hotel, we can book them a flight, we can pay them, we can get them food. But for young people, yeah, we'll throw up a flyer for you. We'll tag you on Instagram. You know, I think that like in an effort to really honor our leadership, we also have to be giving our young people the tools and the resources that they need. Not only do we have to respect their identities, because that's bare minimum, that's step one, but we also got to give them the resources to be able to like get them here, and also give them the resources to be able to grow and expand. I think that every experience, or most experiences, are learning experiences, and the way that you build them can be built for people to learn from them. And what I mean by that is that, like, think about it. If you're putting on a panel, make sure that you're paying your young people. Make sure that your young people are compensated and that like they're given the resources to be able to be here fully and presently. But also make sure that there's something that comes out of that. Don't just invite me to a panel. Don't just invite me to lobby, but like put me onto an internship, put me onto the symposium that you're doing, put me onto like the other work that you're doing, so that I'm really being invited to this table. You're making sure that you're giving me the resources and you're feeding me. You're feeding me by giving me the resources, but you're also teaching me. I think that like, you know, when you talk about youth leadership and when you talk about incubating things, you can't like not do those things. You need to have support. And like I said, like check your implicit biases and check all those other things at the door, because like it's 2022. We got to get with the program. Let's start like, I don't want to have to come into a space to have to educate you on how you should be speaking to me. I don't want to have to come to a space to educate you on like the issues that I'm facing. All like, and what I mean by that is that I'm not going to come and share my experiences and share them as vividly and authentically as I can. But when I share my spaces, don't expect me to know everything about the issue. I can only tell you about what Obrian Rosario has been through. And I'm asking you to support me to get to the table and to get to the place where we can all work together.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And I'm glad that you ended with that, because I remember we talked about that last time of like, there are such limited spaces at the table. And then what ends up happening, this like unintended negative consequences, that then that youth, that young adult is now representing all of these other young adults when you couldn't possibly, right? Like you can only speak to your experience and your identity, which is why we need to create more opportunities. So thank you for highlighting that. And Xavier, I want to ask you, because I think your table is equally as important, but looks a little different than the ones with policymakers, right? Like I know from working in the direct service space, your tables are made up of folks who are creating the programs and services for young people in the community. So I want to ask, like, what has your experience been like in that role? And I know being closer in age, and I remember you used the term like a guider, like being a mentor, being a guider for these young people. Yeah, what has that experience been like? Do you feel like that's benefited you, that you're closer in age and you can say like, actually, I know what we need because I'm also part of this community? I would just love to hear about your experience.
Yeah, for sure. I think that because I'm closer in age to a lot of the youth that come to our groups, I kind of like relate to them more. And so I'm able to like, point out things that need more attention, I guess. And so it does really help that I'm near the same age, but sometimes I have problems with like explaining myself or explaining like what the kids are going through, because I get into my head a little too much. And so then things come out like half explained. And so when I'm able to just like cool down, find my flow, I'm able to get whatever point I'm trying to get across, So yeah, that would be my only issue, I think. But overall, my experience with that's been pretty good due to my age being so close to all the other kids. So overall, good experience.
And do you feel comfortable like in those spaces being like, actually, I think, based on my conversations with some of the folks that I'm working with, maybe we need to implement this program in the community, or maybe we need more of this service, or like, have you ever been in that position?
Yeah, I think I have. There's been a couple of times I feel like when they don't touch on certain subjects, where I have to tell them like, yo, maybe you have to pay attention to this a little bit more, or a few of my youth were saying certain things about this program and what they don't like about it and what they do like about it. And so I just point out the positives and some of the negatives of whatever program we're doing. So yeah.
Yeah, and that just goes to show how important it is having you in that role, because they felt comfortable enough to share that with you. And now your leadership can take that input and hopefully add things or change things around to make it the best possible service. So I appreciate that. And with that being said, I mean, kind of speaking about like giving input, giving feedback to make systems better, what do you all feel like policymakers and other advocates can do within their roles to better support and transfer their power to youth leaders and other experts? Like, what are some actual tangible things that they could do to center the youth voices a little bit better? We could start with
I don't mind starting. I think they can do a couple of things, right? One, making sure that you are hiring and prioritizing young people to be hired on your teams, right? Reaching out to young people for consultation work, right? Also empowering them. I think in order to transfer power, we must also first empower them so they can feel like they can handle the power that you are transferring to them. Putting them in positions of leadership, right? A lot of times I look at different organizational structures, and if there are young people, they usually are in very entry-level roles, right? And so how do we get them to be in a place to where they can be the supervisors, where they can be the directors, right? Putting not only that, but then also when young people are transitioning into the workforce and you are transferring that power, not limiting them to this organization or to this space or to this advocacy center, but also pushing them and encouraging them, right, to use their voice and to use that power to impact others outside of that organization, outside of that space, right? And so really just being intentional about creating space for young people, being intentional about empowering people so they can carry that power, and also being intentional, right, about thinking about what is the layout of our organization, and are we prioritizing young people to be in positions of power, or are we only utilizing their voice to be in entry levels? And I think that would be the main main components of really transferring that power and making sure that young people are equipped to carry that power.
Yeah, 100%. That's so important. I mean, that's even something that I reflected on within our team and that I brought to the team. And we really brainstormed, like, how can we not only make this a leadership position for everyone, but also like a professional development? How can you take this role that you're, in this work that you're doing with us right now to further your own career after this? I think being intentional and thinking about that is really important. But yeah, I wanna pass it to you, Xavier or Obrian. Like, what can we as social justice advocates do to better support young people in their pursuit of systems change?
I feel like just getting to know them, like become their friends, so that they're able to talk to you like a normal person and not like you're a social worker or anything. Just become their friends, because like once you do that, I feel like you open up to the kids more and they open up to you more, and so you're able to find out what the issue is. And so yeah, just getting to know them better, take them out, just something, become their friends, because at the end of the day, they're kids and they're good people and they have good intentions, so just get to know them.
If you don't mind, I want to add on to something that he just said. I think, his point of like just getting to know them, right? It's just the first step. I think mentorship is important. And I don't know if you want to speak to this, but I think that, sometimes we create so much space between emerging adults or experts because we do not understand their experiences, and because a lot of the times it may be uncomfortable to even acknowledge that you or people who have done similar work has harmed young people part of these systems. And so creating space just to have those conversations, you may learn that you are more similar to them than you are not, or you know people that have a lot of those similarities. And I don't know if you wanted to add on to that, but just from what you said, I just wanted to highlight that. Thank you.
No, you literally are speaking to what I was thinking, is just, we can't minimize that trust, how important that trust building is in this entire process, because you're right, we're dealing with the very systems that have harmed not only us, but also our generations before us, and that there needs to be some sort of like restorative practice kind of integrated into that process too. So thank you for saying that. What about you, Obrian? Was there anything you wanted to share?
Yeah, no, I think that like Xavier and Christina spoke to it perfectly. I think that community is definitely something that we should be building with young people in a meaningful and authentic way, helping them hold space and take up space. But I think that like the approach that we've taken at the Peer Defense Project has been adopting the movement lawyering principles. And so there's three main areas and three main ways that I feel like people can be, just advocating and supporting the movement. First and foremost, I think it's through material resources. Material resources meaning moving the money, moving the teachers, moving the school books, moving the different resources that we need to young people, so that they're able to even, be human beings that are navigating through their lives. I think that when we talk about just in general, the overall term of like the world and where we're at today, we've really moved into this late capitalist stage where we're not meeting people's needs. People don't have housing, people don't have food, people don't have education. And when you don't have your basic needs being met, your survival needs being met, then everything else is just going to be that much harder. So I think that material resources to meet basic needs is number one, most important thing that we can be doing right now to reduce harm. Secondly, youth autonomy. I think that like we build a lot of institutions and a lot of things so that we can strip power away from youth. And there hasn't been a real move to get power back into youth's hands. There's a lot of movements around the country to lower the voting age, and what that would mean to get youth autonomy. There's a lot of movements around the country, especially in New York City, around getting youth on school boards. There's a lot of movement around ending mayoral control in New York City. And those type of things of getting power back into youth and getting power into youth's hands, I think are really beautiful and really powerful, and like really ways that we need to be moving as well. I think that speaks to a lot of what y'all were saying, is that youth, not only are our needs not being met, but we don't even have the power and the leadership roles to be able to like be doing the work. And so when we talk about like, being able to help youth and support the movement, it looks like giving youth autonomy. And then finally, I think that like when we remove institutional power, that's also a very powerful way that we can like be supporting and helping youth. There's a bunch of adults that work in different capacities, whether that's at organizations, whether that's in the government, whether that's in, you know, all these different institutions. And there's way to move power and get power into youth's hands. And so I think that like there's really creative ways that we should be looking at like addressing these needs. It's 2022, I'll say again, and what we know is that like it hasn't been working. It hasn't been working up until this point, and it's time to start getting creative. It's time to get in the lab and start cooking. And I think that like that's what exactly we need to do. And I'll end it off by saying that like what I mean by creative is that we start getting bold and unprecedented, just as the youth have. I think that one value that youth live, and one of the values that we live by at the Peer Defense Project, is that like both youth are bold and unprecedented. We're most susceptible to going through the change. Our generation is doing it already, and we want to get out there and do it. And so let's start doing it. Let's start getting youth mayors. Let's start getting youth city council members. Let's start getting youth chancellors, and let's start getting youth in positions of power to make decisions for you.
Yeah, that was powerful. And I love that you gave us some concrete steps. Like, you know, folks can't say we don't know how to engage youth. You just gave us 3 really tangible next steps. And I appreciate that. And it made me kind of think of another question of just like this work that you're all doing and, you know, social justice advocates are doing. What kind of world is that working to? And so I feel like I want to ask you all, like, what happens when youth are given the power that they deserve? Like, what would that world look like when you imagine that? And maybe Xavier, we could start with you.
I feel like when the youth are given the power, I feel like they bring up a lot of good points to things that that the community needs, or some changes that we need to do. And so they bring up not like a variety of different points. I mean, I feel like a lot of kids that don't speak up have a lot of different thoughts on a lot of different things. And so when they're able to have the power to talk up, there's like a lot of things that they could help us with, I guess.
Yeah, you're right. Even to start thinking about the things that impact them. Like, we need to be giving folks the space to have those conversations and start thinking about how these systems impact me and my relationship with that. Thank you. What about you, Christina or Obrian?
Yeah, I don't mind going. You know, what I think about it is, you know, I feel like when experts are in positions of power, I feel like we're going to see a system that no longer exists the way that it exists, right? I want there to be a world where foster care is not even a thing. Like we don't we reimagine it completely. You know what I'm saying? Where social workers have had the same experiences as those young people, and they're like, you know what, we're going to do everything in our power to make sure your family has those resources so you're not removed. So we do everything in our power to make sure that your transition is supported, to make sure that we have everything in line for you, to where you have mentorship, to where you have support, right? I think that when experts are in positions, things are done totally different. We see policies and changes start to spark up, because it's not just policies that are geared from the perspectives of people who have no idea of the experiences truly, or no idea of how this is going to truly impact those young people or people coming up in a negative or positive way. But people who have had those experiences, they understand the importance of lived experience. They understand the need of those people to be a part of those conversations. And so there will no longer be any policies. There will no longer be any legislation that does not have the input and the expertise of those that have lived experience. When I think about a world that is ran by experts, it is a world that we cannot even fathom in this moment, because we have not seen it, right? We have just started to create this table, right? Bringing people to the table, but usually the table is only for information gathering, and you can decide what you want to do with it or what you don't want to do with it. But when young people or experts are at that table, they're going to throw away the entire table. It's going to be non-existent, and they're going to go to those people and they're going to say, I want you here, I need you here, and not only I want to follow you, but you are the leaders, right? And so I can't wait until we have a world where experts are in our senators, our presidents, our are X, Y, and Z, and age does not matter, whether they're 16, whether they're 12, or whether they're 25. They need and deserve to be in those spaces because their voices are important and essential to the work that we do.
Totally. I think that's even, Xavier, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that's kind of even what you were saying is like, I think if we actually invited young people to the table, they probably would have a lot of innovative strategies to fixing some of these problems. But again, we just haven't, there's not enough of those tables. We're not creating enough of those opportunities to hear their voices. And again, for them to have to be thought-provoking in that way, to think about strategizing some solutions. So thank you for saying that. Did anyone else want to share their thoughts?
Yeah, I can jump in. I think that in addition, I think it speaks to what I was speaking to a little bit earlier when I was saying, like, you know, when we're trying to support youth, it looks like giving them the resources and giving them the things that they need to be able to get to the table. And I think that like young people, like I was also speaking to, are more predetermined to be able to take those risks and want to like address issues. And so I think that like a world where young people are empowered and get the things that we're asking for is a world where a world that'll look like issues that have such deeply rooted problems will be able to be solved. I think that the roots will be uptaken and that we'll be able to plant new trees and envision a new world. But I think that like more importantly, and I think that very important for me is that I think that we would live in a more beautiful world. I think that we would live in a more fun world. I think that we would live in a more colorful and vibrant world. When I think of the world now, I think of a very dark time that we're living in, dark time that we've been living through for thousands of years, where people are punished. Darkness is what reigns. It reminds me, I don't know if you ever watched Legend of Korra, but there was like an episode where there was two spirits. There was like an evil spirit and a good spirit. And pretty much like it was up to the avatar to like keep us away from like the good spirit or the bad spirit. And if she lost the fight, then like the bad spirit reigns for 10,000 years. But if she won, then the good spirit reigns for 10,000. I think that once we give young people the power and the support that they need, they'll be much like in the position of the avatar where they get to decide whether we choose the good or the bad. But I'm very sure that it'll be the good, and that the world we live in will be a world that we want to live in, a world with more love, a world with more laughter, a world with more color, and a world that's more beautiful.
Yeah, seriously, snaps. That was beautiful. I love how you put that. Well, I appreciate what all three of you are doing on behalf of your communities and in the communities. I think it's so powerful. And I hope that even other young people can watch this live stream and think to themselves, like, actually, I could also be in this leadership position and speaking towards these systems. And I have a right to, because they impact me. So I just want to give you all one more opportunity before we log off. Like, was there any final words, any kind of final message or call to action that you want to say for any policymaker or social justice advocate that's listening? And it's okay if you don't.
Yeah, I wanted to say something. If there is a young person that is listening and you have been searching for your voice and you've been searching for your purpose, know that there are a lot of advocacy organizations that are out there. There's a lot of spaces for your voice to be uplifted, and your voice is essential and is needed to the conversation. And if you have an organization out there and you are doing work on policy, you're doing work on child welfare, and you do not have youth at the table, if you do not have young, emerging, brilliant minds there, think about the importance of creating that space, right? And if you don't know how to create that space, then reach out to those emerging adults so they can help you build that space so those young people feel comforted. Thank you.
Yeah, that's huge. Not knowing is not an excuse, because there are organizations out here doing it. So thank you. Anybody else have any final words they want to share?
And just because, you know, my title is Executive Director of Outreach, so everywhere I go, I'm going to tell you about the events that we're putting together. And so just to invite y'all really quickly, I put it in the chat. Ben Crump and myself will be keynoting on a panel next week, Tuesday, talking about the intersections of education and racial justice. We've launched a historic anti-racist lawsuit in New York City. So come out and see what that's all about. We're also building a hybrid summit called Open Up the Cages, how New York City punishes its youth, really focusing on like, you know, the youth punishment system and carceral system in New York and how we can wage a path towards abolition. And in terms of what I want to leave you here all with today is that like all of this is an approach, but this is an approach that was made in community. I think that like nobody has the key, so to say. There's not one solution. There's not a one size fits all. But when people come together, everything worthwhile is done. That's a Mariami Kaba quote. Everything worthwhile is done together, and that's what I'll leave y'all here with today. And I'll also say that the world is about to get real beautiful if you keep supporting and putting young people like Christina, Xavier, and myself at the forefront.
Yeah, I believe in that 100%. I'm a big believer in the butterfly effect. I think even small changes create macro changes. Even those one-on-one conversations, Xavier, that you're having with your young people, even those conversations with policymakers at the table that y'all are having, I think is meaningful and impactful. And Xavier, I'm sorry if I did cut you off, if you wanted to say something.
No, you're good. I feel like Christina and Obrian said everything that needed to be said. I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself, to be honest with you. So give them props, you know. I think they got everything down that I would like to say, so I think I'm good.
Amazing. Well, thank you all again. And I think I'm gonna go ahead and pass the mic back to Patty, but we appreciate all three of you.
Thank you, Kendra, and thank you to our extraordinary panel. This has been Leading with Power, Engaging Youth in Transformative Advocacy, presented by the National Center for Youth Law. We want to extend special thanks to our event sponsors, Kravitz, Latham and Watkins LLP, and O'Melveny. Stay tuned for more information about our next NCYL Live event on April 27th. This concludes our event. Thank you.